Welcome to this session of Your Unique Genius Showcase event. I'm your host, Carla Atherton, and for this session, we have my friend and dynamo, Lori Moore, here to interview me on the topic of fantasy, magical realism, desire, and love. And a welcome to Vale's Edge as well. So what I'm going to do is just introduce Lori and read her quick and very short bio. And whatever I miss in the bio, you're going to be able to read. I'll put more about Lori in the show notes. So Lori Moore is an aspiring naturalist and has created a course for teens to inspire philosophical growth and wisdom over technological protocols. And so that's like saying the very least of what Lori does. So like I said, I'm going to fill that all in with a bunch of good, juicy information about Lori, her programs, what she's doing, creations, all that kind of thing. So Lori, I'm so honored that you agreed to do this with me and actually interview me for this session, because you're actually the first person I thought about when I had to think about someone who I wanted to interview me. So thanks so
Aw.
much for being here.
Yay, Carla. Well, thank you and good afternoon, because it is afternoon now on this lovely fall day. And I'm interviewing you because you've been working on something epic. And I'm a huge fan, like big fangirl. I've been so excited to see the whole thing like premiere in its entirety. You've been sharing a lot already on Instagram and via email if you're a subscriber, which is great, but I just can't wait to see like the whole thing and be able to hold it all and to hear it all, right?
Yes.
You've been working on a lot of good things, including organizing a summit, which this will be a part of, and this is a part of. And we'll let you say a little bit about that later. But your passion project right now, and what we're going to talk about right now, is this fantasy work that you've been working on that we call the Veil's Edge. And I have to tell you that it's so perfect. So you have this cast of characters, and I don't really know where to start with this, but I want to ask you, I'm going to be asking you what your purpose is for this. That's a big question. I realize that, but it has an underlying purpose. It's not just a fiction novel. It's an experience with a capital E. It's an experience, and it will greet your listeners and your readers in multiple dimensions, including audio. You are singing on these tracks, the lovely voice. The music itself is carefully curated for a certain select mood enhancement during the journey. And it seems like you have channeled, if we can say that, your whole this book, imbibing it with you all the way. But it seems like most of your work up until now has your creative work has been like feeding into this zenith. The chickens outside the window here. This culmination of your creativity. So I'm going to ask you again then. Why? Big question. Why? Who's it for, and why?
All right. First off, I love the chickens. Second, I don't know if anybody heard this, but at the very beginning when I was introducing you, that's why I was a little like distracted. My cat was deciding to have a big spaz right outside of my door because she doesn't get along with the other cats that are outside. So we have life happening all the time. All right. So why? Your question is why? Oh, okay. So I'm going to back up a little bit from that question, if you don't mind, Lori. And so I had a resurgence of my interest in fantasy fiction. And I took like a class when I was doing my MA, like way back in the day. And I'm not going to tell you how long ago that was, but it was a long time ago. And I got into like a lot of different things. I've always had this thread of literature and creativity and writing and expression and all that throughout my whole life from, when I was first taught, like I was told that I passed grade one, even though I missed like 3 months of it. And I was only 5 in grade one because I had mumps and measles. And I passed because I was a good reader. And that kind of stuck with me. I was like, "Oh, a good reader? What's that mean?" And I didn't read. I wasn't encouraged to read even until I was about 13, 12, 13, and I started reading like The Babysitter's Club.
Uh-huh.
Stuff like, and then I switched over to like horror. Like I don't know where that happened. Like one cousin was reading like Babysitter's Club, really tame things, and I'm like, "I'll read this." And I started reading one after the other. And then I started reading like horror, like Clive Barker, Stephen King, Flowers in the Attic kind of crap like that. And I don't say crap, some stuff like that, because my other cousin was reading those kinds of things, right? So this love of literature was almost like a self-propelled thing because nobody told me to do it, but I would see other people and what they were doing. And then I started writing poetry in my teens because when I was in grade 9, I had a friend who I thought was like super cool. And she was writing poetry in a book that she called Me, Myself, and I. Well, what did I do? I emulated that and I got a notebook and I called it Me, Myself, and I. And so I started writing all this poetry that I would look back and I'm like, wow, it was very new. It was very like amateur stuff, but it was a way to speak my truth. And I put all of those poems all over my room. So anybody who was invited into my space, it was a safe place for me to speak to them about these really deep things that I was thinking about in a way that wasn't kind of scary. It was still a little bit scary because I would see them laying on my bed reading it, friends and stuff like that, where I would just put them up on the wall. Anyway, so that was my kind of introduction into like this need for self-expression that I was never taught that. I just felt it. So I'm not going to go through the whole story. Like that's another story in and of itself. But from there, I went into literature. I actually went into psychology in university and I went, nah, this is not for me. I did like 3 years and I switched over to arts, where everybody said, what are you doing that for? That's like a waste of time. And I'm like, no, that's all I want to do. I'm not here to get a career and make a bunch of money. I just want to University is a place, it's a place to be introduced to the universe. That's the whole idea. It's not to funnel you into something to make you into like this square box. And so, which to some degree it can do that, but I wasn't going there for that reason. So anyway, from there I dabbled in different genres. I started writing a book. And then I was like, I'm gonna win the Man Booker Prize for this sucker. And I had all these aspirations, and little did I know it was going to be like how many years? 29 years later that I actually started writing the books. And the initial book, the original book, wasn't fantasy. It was actually like a real kind of life, setting that, you could kind of relate to the characters, and it was just straight up fiction. But the spirit of it it kind of like lived with me all these years. And so all the experiences that I've had to date, all of, the study in like psychology and functional medicine and the cosmos and getting into things like, I don't know, I mean, why we're here, philosophy, becoming like, well, what do you call that? Um, I'm a philomath, right? Like where I love learning. A philomath. I'm not a polymath quite yet. I mean, I like to pull all different things together like science and math and literature and art, and I see how they all intersect. There's a layer of all of those things in my books too, and all my work I do. But I wouldn't, be so highfalutin to say I'm actually like a successful polymath. Like, okay, I'm an aspiring polymath, but I'm a lover of learning. Okay. And so all of those life experiences, being a mom, I've got grown kids now, um, they teach me so much. They've taught me so much throughout their lives, and now they teach me like every day because that's what we're here to do in relationship, is to be mirrors for each other and also like a playground to do this thing called life with other people, We get to learn about what love means because we have this soul pod that we get to explore with. And so the resurgence of fantasy came with my daughter, actually. Well, two of them. One of them reads more like thriller. And the other one, and my son connects me a lot to nature and things like that. But my one daughter is she's a book nerd like me too. Like we love being book nerds and just hanging out and reading. And we're the kind of like duo that can just be quiet and do that. And then we'll kind of come out of the book and say, listen to this, or that kind of relationship. And so she was reading these fantasy books, and some of them were like, I'm like, you're reading this at what age? Because we don't censor what they're reading. And they're very self-led, as far as their learning goes and their interests. They always have been. And Lori, we have that in common, how we've I don't want to even say raised our kids, but stewarded their growth, be the bow for their arrows. So anyway,
Nice.
so all along I've been sort of teaching, writing workshops and such, and keeping that finger on the pulse of that part of my being. But when I started reading these books, something just awakened in me that was, I think, actually suppressed with fear, because there were some diagnoses in our family, and I went deep into functional medicine and I got a whole bunch of designations. I studied with Functional Medicine University. I became a health and wellness coach. I went down the whole holistic, and that's all well and good. And it added to my breadth, of knowledge. And also, more importantly, I got there was wisdom that came from that whole experience that wasn't learned in those books that I was reading. It was more about the experience and how I was responding to life and those sorts of things. So when she was reading these, I'm like, I'm just gonna read some fiction, because I just put so much pressure on myself. I felt like, I had to hurry to find the answers. Or my daughter, my middle daughter, there would be awful things that would happen to her health, because she was the one with the big kind of challenges as far as health was concerned. And I needed a break from the this, and I needed to go back in here. So I started reading these books. And like I said, I've had this huge, like, some people say I had an awakening because I had some big psychedelic experience. And like those happen. That's all great. But I had this awakening through reading fiction that was considered to be like juvenile, like teen fiction, fantasy
Huh.
fiction. Although the books did get moved into the adult category, because they don't belong in the kids
Ah,
category, in
you're
the
like,
juvenile
who?
category at all.
What's the
There's some
rating scale around here?
there's some spicy scenes in there, but it wasn't all that. It's not at all. But it awakened this, um, I don't know, the heart space again. Why we read in the first place, why we engage in other people's story, whether it be fiction or reality, right? It doesn't actually matter. It doesn't matter if it's this person's actually in your life in the flesh and blood, or if they're on the page, because you still have a relationship, and your emotionality in your body, they don't know the difference. We don't know the difference. You
That's
still
a
feel
thing.
it.
That is so
The thing.
true. You ever wake up from a dream and you like have to relinquish the characters in your dream or the
Yeah,
whole event and just go, okay, so that didn't happen. But now I
but it
feel like a
did.
kind of mourning for it.
Yeah.
Weird.
And in some way, in a different way of looking at it, it did happen, because you had the emotions, you went through the experience. There's like a phenomenon that's been written about, where there'll be tragedies around the world, and people will watch this on the news, and they'll actually have PTSD or some kind of traumatic response because of something that happened to other people, and they weren't even there. They
Hmm.
just experienced it through their emotional body. It was how they responded to it in that way. So I mean, so fact and fiction for me, they blur. The lines are very blurred in there. Also, I'm very into like dreams. You talked about dreams. I've actually been writing about my dreams since I was a teenager. Again, I have no idea why I started doing that. I just started doing it. And then that came back to me too. I had this whole resurgence of things that I kind of planted seeds for early on, and then didn't really realize I was actually expanding in all of those areas without even really realizing it because I was out experiencing life.
Yeah.
So when I revisit things, even cliches, let's say a cliche, like it is what it is. And I used to think it was so flippant, but now I'm like, oh, I understand that in a completely different way now. On complete, like in completely different way because of things that I've been exposed to and, right, like all kinds of things. Anyway, okay, so getting back to that story about the why and the series and how it started, um, I was just having all kinds of connections and weaving. And so I actually was introduced to this idea of the weaver and the spider and creating our own reality. And I thought, I'm like, yeah, I feel like I'm weaving all of these things and it's starting to look like something, like a tapestry that I'm like, how do I talk about this? And I didn't want to be on my soapbox. Okay. I mean, I've been on I wrote a whole soapbox book and I love my book. Okay. I love my book and go get it. It's like really good
Right?
for holistic health. Right.
Uh-huh.
But that's not how I wanted to communicate with people. And I've always even said this when I was like 18 years old, or well, no, it's more like 19 because I was switching majors. And I was like, I don't want to assess people. I don't want to tell people what to do. I don't want to shame or blame or, purport to have all the answers. I want people to shine their light. I want to tell them that they can. And that way they figure all that stuff out for themselves. And I want to tell a story because we can connect in a way with story that we can't connect by soapboxing or telling people the way things are, because for one thing we don't know, so it's bullshit anyway. Like we're just all here figuring this out. So then I'm thinking about these fantasy novels, and I reread. I there are um, two series. How do you say series plural? But two series that I read twice, and trust me, you should see how many books are around here, and I have like probably 10 on the go at least that I'm seriously reading at once. And I know I shouldn't do that; it's not a very good idea, but it's how I roll. So, and for me to have that many books that I want to get to, but to read these giant books twice, there were 11 books in total. I couldn't help myself, but I had to go back and read them again. There are
Wow.
a couple of writers that affect me like that. I want to actually go back to another series that's like 1,200 pages each book, and I want to read those again too, because they are masterfully doing this where I can look at it and analyze it and say, as being on this like literature and analyze it this way. But it's a felt, like you feel that they are masters of this weaving and the characters are real and the stories are universal. And that's the whole point, right? Is that we see the humanity in all of these stories and these characters, and you were going on that ride and you're playing, baby. Like you're having a good time, and you're at the same time you're having epiphanies and you're crying and you're all these things are happening. I know that if I've written a scene that is supposed to evoke some kind of emotion, and if I'm crying while I'm writing it, I got it.
Mhm.
Then I go, okay, I got it. I think I got this one. But if I'm not, I'm still like, I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it. Okay, so I was thinking about these fantasy series, and I'm, like, how do they build these giant worlds? It was just like unfathomable to me to sit down and actually create something like that, where the world is believable and all these characters that intersect. And then what if one of them, shows up at this timeline and then later on, like, how do you weave all that in? But I knew that as soon as I thought that, I swear that it was set in stone, I was gonna do it. Because, it's like the one thing you go, "Nah, I don't think I'm gonna do that," and then you're gonna do it. I have many, many examples of that in my life that I was like, "I'm not doing it." Yeah, actually, I'm doing it. That's exactly.
Somebody's got to do it. I mean, who are all the doers? They're people that like thought of something and said, try to stop me because it's walking in that direction.
Well,
Um,
the people that stop us are ourselves anyway. You
It's
know,
true.
it's
It's true.
just really that's who stops us. So I know I do have that kind of warrior woman in me too that says that, "Try to stop me." Mhm. So I thought, "No, I'm never gonna do this." And then 3 months later, I started doing it. Like I couldn't help it. The name came to me, Vale's Edge. I was like, "It's 7 books." And this is what and then I started to organize this and then I was sort of inserting characters from that old novel that I'd started 20 years ago or 30 years, sorry, it was 20, 30 years ago almost.
Okay.
Right? And they started to and then they totally morphed. They're not even the same at all, but it was the catalyst for some of the things that are happening, but it completely like it blew up, Lori. It just blew up.
Oh,
I
I
have like
know.
it's crazy. It's crazy, and I'm really glad that what I did, what I have are like, I have this system now where I put everything in these different documents, Google Docs, and I sort and I shift and I take notes. Like, I have this whole, process that allows me to do something of this scale. Okay, so why? Why is because I just this story has to be told. And I really I'm loving it, and I want other people to love it, and it's not like where I have, like, these, very high-reaching kind of aspirations for it, of course, like, where I want people to have healing experiences when they're listening. I want them to feel loved and witnessed even though it's not their story, but it's everyone's story.
Yeah.
It's everyone's story. Everyone's fallen in love. Well, not everyone, but like to some degree, everyone has, like moms, have these things happen, or dads, or relationships, or um, all like tragedy,
The quest, the
traumas.
adventure, the unknown, the courage, the
Yeah,
leaving, the not knowing, the doing anyway. And I was
yeah,
waiting for you to say that everyone reading your books can find themselves in it
yeah,
in different angles, not just one character. And
yeah.
you're going to bring about a type of reality on this side of the books
Mm,
when one person reads it and when many people read them.
I love it. Thank you for saying that because that's also, I mean, we'll see. It's an experiment. I can have all these aspirations, but I don't want to sound like, I got this like God complex and I'm going to change the world. But we all do with a ripple. And so, and what I mean like by how I want to do a bloody damn good job. And I want it to go down in the literary canon as one of the greats because not for me, but because what it is and what it's becoming and how it's weaving together all kinds of voices. It's not just me. Half the things that I come up with, I'm like driving down the street and I'm like, oh, there's Ezra. That's exactly what he looks like. And that
Oh,
wasn't me. That was this guy with the fro and mutton chops. And I'm
hmm,
like, that's what he looks like, man. And then something someone says, or something from another book that I read, all of it that we do in life, when we have epiphanies, it's not because we thought of something that was completely like nobody knew about. It was that we realized something that already existed. We like, oh, I remembered this, or it was something I had an inkling toward. It was like a revelation of something that already existed. We're unearthing all of this stuff. So I want, for me, I get my intention and my would be my biggest excitement is for people to have that kind of feedback for me that says, "Oh my God, Carla, I this brought this forth for me," or "I found that part so healing," or just listening to you reading that book was very calming for me, or allowed me to look at something in my own life because when we listen to a story, we connect. If we listen to someone telling us shoulds and wagging their fingers at us and we feel bad about all these things in our lives and what we shoulding all over ourselves and all this crap, we disconnect, we shut down. We and not just from other people, but other like all kinds of parts in ourselves. So that is one of the things that is just going to be my greatest joy when, and I'm going to say when I pull that off. because this is it can't not I can't not do that. It has to be because that's this is why I'm doing that. And then there's that reader writer, interaction, and all the stuff with all the characters. I just get giddy. Like I'm thinking about, I can't wait. This is the whole concept we're talking about, but the actual stories, I just
Yeah.
like, I can't wait for people to read what happens because there is a plot. It's not just philosophical. Like there's stuff going down in those books for a lot of people. And I have favorite characters and I mean, I love them all, but I mean, I think my favorite character right now is named Coyote, and he shows up big time in book 6. I gotta wait for book 6 for you all to meet him. Well, you've met him, but you won't actually really get his full story until then. So I'm having a hell of a time.
Now
S-
you've shared a lot so far
Yeah,
in the public. So would you like to give a type of overview now and introduce us to some of the characters,
cool.
please?
I, I'm gonna do this off the cuff because there's always like so much going on in my head. I'm like, how do I
Well,
start this up?
I believe it's our future where there's a divergence between dystopian and utopian,
Mm-hmm.
and then the journey is bridging a gap, and it's a journey of healing and discovery. I suspect when I get to see the whole thing.
100%, Lori. Thank you. You gave me words. Thank you. Because, oh, yeah. I mean, the whole thing started off actually with this idea of the East and the West. And so the East was supposed to be like, more the utopia, and the West is more the dystopia. But the more I wrote about these characters and fell in love with the ones in the West,
Yeah.
I realized that the
Oh,
East actually had learning. They learned from the people in the West as well, right? In the Western world. And so, and they on the West also needed to learn also from the East because they were being stewarded into a new, I'm gonna say humanity. I don't want people to run away, oh no, she's gonna start talking like that. But no, okay, it's important because what's happening in the West is they're learning from through suffering. We all have pain. We all have pain. Even in the East and the West, all of us, regardless of, how much you meditate and how quote unquote evolved you are. I don't think that we're ever evolved. We are always evolving and becoming, by the way, but it doesn't matter. There's still pain. We still lose. And I shouldn't use the word lose because I'm playing with language a lot. And it's very important to me to use the right words, but we still feel loss. We still grieve, when people die. We still have disappointment. We still feel, a depression or a questioning and all those sorts of things. We just would feel it less or be able to make sense of it a lot faster or a lot more completely integrate all those experiences when we come from a space of love. And I'm not talking about love, candy, hearts, Valentine's Day. That's lovely. That is. But I'm talking about this L with a capital or love with a capital L. Love with a capital L. And that's so much more than just a fleeting kind of conditional sort of thing that makes us feel happy, joy, joy. It does, but it's because it is connecting. It's a connection point to all that is. And so when we learn from that, we still have the life lessons. We're just in this sort of samsara, of learning from pain and from suffering. Pain is also a teacher, so we don't run away from that. But people in the West are suffering and in the books, and in the East um they have pain, they have all the human emotion, but they don't suffer like they do in the West. And so I actually play with that and I blur the lines, and so that's the whole fantasy aspect, and the whole world is actually very different. I incorporate all kinds of different things all the way to the deep East and sort of like to the stars, like there's a lot of stuff that happens. There's shamanism, there's like the idea, like what's the difference between magic, small m magic, which is illusion, and big M magic, which is literally tapping into, the spirit and the soul of like the elements and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. So what I okay, so I'm gonna kind of scale down a little bit to your question. So you were asking me introduce you to the people and like what's going on in these books. And so the first book actually starts off with a character named, well, there's actually a lot of them, and I thought the book would be mainly about specific characters. So the first book was going to be more about Kamaria. And
Right.
Kamaria is the mom. Okay, so her story starts where she goes off to the Western realm as an envoy. They call them envoys. And she crosses over the border from realm to realm because she wants to know what it's like. She lives in this seemingly perfect place. Why would you want to go? So I do read that scene. Actually, I'm going to release that on my YouTube channel, but I do read it. I have a little like 1.5 minute clip of it in on my Instagram, but the whole thing is where it's like the whole question of why would you leave this? Well, why do we land here on Earth to be at all? It's to learn these lessons of humanity. And so, and she also wants to be able to help, she wants to be able to,
Right.
like know what it is that all these people are experiencing. And so she goes there and she lives there for 10 years. And so it's all the whole story of meeting Kage, and everybody know that his name is pronounced Kage, not Cage. Okay. So I think I'm going to print that in the book so people are like reading it as Cage, but it's Kage. And they know she has children, and all these things happen in the first book. And each subsequent book was going to be about each of like the main character being each of her children, and the last one being her parents, because they're the ones that start it and they bring it all together. But it's not just going to those, it grew to so much more, so many more stories and people woven in through there, that side characters never stayed side characters. They all have their own story and they weave through each other's stories. So I'll be writing a piece in, book 4, because I felt inspired to do it, and I'll be like, oh wait, they meet in book 1. Oh my God. And so I'll go back to book 1 and I'll write that. So anyway, so that's her journey. And I think I should stop there because, well, because there are way too many. There's so many really like deeply interesting stories that I'm not quite yet ready to talk about, but they are all um yeah, they're all being written at the same time, actually. All 7 books are being written at the same time, but I'm trying to get the first one out, just at least that one, like, a little more linearly written right now, but it's still coming in a spiral.
But early enough, we get to enjoy these rich dynamics
Yeah.
between
Oh, yeah.
elders who are charged with knowing more, knowing better, but we know
Mhm.
that that's a fallible, to commit to that notion is inaccurate. But when you do have the good fortune to have an elder who has retained tradition that
Yeah.
supported generations, and to have that at your disposal, and you have characters like that here. So your reading audience, now I told you right away, oh, I'm going to let my teenage girls listen, and you did go like a little, wait, like there was a little disclaimer there. So why is that?
Well, because I'm utterly honest. I don't go into like, if there's a scene, there are love scenes in it. And I actually love love scenes. And it's a real challenge to write them in like tastefully and not, like pornographically or like explicitly, but those themes are because that's a huge part. Sensuality is a huge part of this human existence. So that's why I said that. And some people are like, well, maybe we shouldn't be reading that. Our kids, maybe like 5-year-olds, no, or 10, like, but most of this stuff is not going to be for them anyway. It's a little bit over their heads. They're still reading like picture books and things like that. But the
I
teenagers could do it. It's not, it's just that it's just honest. And I write everything tastefully though, just so you know. Yeah.
Well, I pick up books here and there. I'm not an avid fiction reader, but if I get it out of the free library or I'm at Barnes and Noble one day and I just grab one because I judge books by their cover usually.
I totally
And
do.
all my other books are all like educational, if you will. So whenever I get these books that I enjoy, they often end up getting like what I would say like bombed right in the middle by something explicit that I'm like, well, now I can't share this with my daughter because I don't want to, because it is, in my mind,
Uh-huh.
it is raunchy. I didn't need to know all the details and I could like honestly do without it just because that's just my taste. And I wish that there was some kind of way that authors were more honest on the outside about what kind of bombs and surprises you find on the inside. But
Mm.
I know you and your tone and your artistic ability. So I would feel safe sending my daughters into any space that you create.
Okay, you know what? I have a response for that. Well, a huge part, like one of the like I'm gonna just use the word theme. It's not the right word, but one of the things that I really think about while I'm writing and that I want to convey is that there is this, and I love the word pseudo, you know, the word pseudo as opposed to sacred. And the pseudo is what we're trying to do to like titillate and force a reaction or, you know, do something sensational, you know, like that's where people get totally pissed because they want to feel good. And I'm not there's no shade here. I'm just saying that those kinds of things are the pseudo, you know, we're just looking for that kind of high and it's temporary and it doesn't really get integrated into your being. It doesn't come from this place of like full on life. It's literally trying to pump life into like a balloon with a, you know, a leak. And
Mm.
that's the pseudo, you know, that's what we're looking for, like the small m magic, for instance, or the small l love, or the small s sex, you know, and so like, so what I want people to feel when they read my books is that big M magic, that big L love, that big S sex, which is literally sensuality. So I want that experience to be felt and not to be like, you know, like bombarded with it and overstimulated by it and just there's no sort of sucking the beauty out of it. And like I said, people have lots of fun with things like that. And there's no shade, but for my books and for my books, I don't want to say but, and for my books though, yeah, my goal is to get to that sacred space of all of those things, which is like it's so nourishing and satisfying and you know you can fade to black and still have the echoes, you know, of like, oh man, that was such a beautiful love scene, or that made me laugh like you wouldn't believe, or you know it didn't have to like just, you know, flash in your face, you know, where so we've got that sacred. And I don't know if the word sacred, but I'm just going to use that as opposed to pseudo. So this is where like it's actually, Lori, I'm glad you mentioned that because it's really very much in the forefront of my mind as I write every scene that I write, even if it's like a violent scene, you know, how far do I go? I'm not going to say, oh, the guts sprayed everywhere and the brains and then that's like, well, anybody can say that. But how do you write that poetically? How do you write that where someone felt it, not because they were like shocked, but because they felt it, they were there, they were there, they smelt it, they saw it, it was like it was like, yeah, I don't know, I mean it was an experience, let's say, right, it was experienced rather than just kind of like voyeurism, if that makes sense. So
Oh,
yeah, I do very much think about that.
I also think back to the intimate parts of any intentionally written book that was actually caring for the readers in the process of
Mhm.
creating it, is that I don't think we have enough healthy sexual imagery well
Yeah.
anywhere. So I happened to came into my life was the Ringing Cedar series, and it does
Mm.
have of course not explicit, but the idea of procreation, the idea of men and women coupling. And this was such a positive way to bring it about in one's mind that I needed to get in front of all the rest for my children. So I gave these books to them first
Yeah.
before they were watching TV and saw all the movies that I watched in the 80s, and so on and so forth. If you could get there first, I think that if we could help them see these positive health, what I believe are healthy, healthy sexual images,
Mhm.
that is I think missing from our even our household curriculum. Not ours, but
Well,
ours.
yeah. Yeah, and also a part of what I intend as well is even the stuff that isn't healthy, right? Because there are scenes from the Western realm that are difficult and that are yet and they're juxtaposed with the ones like, in the healthier. And I guess we can use the word healthy, but non-damaging, serving each other, like it's yeah. So there are scenes like that, right? That are in there. But again, it's capturing the whole picture. Like what, and again, it's not like inflammatory. It's not designed to shock people. It's to tell the story of what happened to this person and then how they moved into something else, how their character evolved from that. And there, like I said, there's also like tendencies toward violence. So there's a character named Oberon, and he comes over after everybody in his platoon is dead, and he's the only one who survives, and he's the gruff, like the one that you would think it deserved to die. And he has to live with that, and he has to reconcile that, and he has to actually reawaken his own he has to remember himself, and that he deserves to live. And so there's like and then he becomes this person who shines that light for other people, and he becomes that beacon, that light. That So, and I'm total spoiler, sorry about that, but he's not like a major character. He comes in book 2. So anyway, yeah, so, and another thing I want to say, yeah, so there's a lot of honesty, and like I said, seeing the poetry in all of that, even the painful stuff, even um the difficult things, because this is our reality, right? There's a way to speak about that sees all of it without having to hide it or censor it. You know, there's a way to do that, and it takes quite a bit of like thought put into it, but it does actually, like, for me, I feel like it sort of pours out of me in poetic prose. So honestly, I think that, and I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about the poets. I think that like it's the poets, who have like, it's not the scientists or the metaphysical, like the with esoteric knowledge. It's the poets who got the finger on the pulse of what this is to be human. It's the poets. So anyway, I do want to say one more thing, Lori. Okay. And you asked me to talk about the books and, kind of like get
Yeah.
into the books. I actually should really mention that book 1 has like this sort of like questioning illusion and reality, and illusion and magic and those sorts of ideas. And it's got like a very well, there's a bit of a carnivalesque feeling at the beginning, but it's like there's questions of power, and there's some, mob kind of activity. Will you consider it that going on in that book? And like what makes you safe, and money and power and all these different kinds of things, those questions. And then book 2, I'm just trying to think. Oh, there's a lot of like earth kind of related things like shamanism and those sorts of themes. And that's where Oberon shows up. So we're thinking about things like war and warriors and where those lines are. And then book 3 has a lot of water imagery. I love this one. And there's like deep diving and into the wreck. And what does that all mean? And there's like some really significant healing that happens in that book too, for a character that his name is Eric. And anyway, so and then the fourth book, there's a lot of like otherworldly stuff, like the cosmos, and other beings and things like that. And then book 5 has a lot of like slavery imagery and, back to the South and singing and chorus and healing through song and, big boisterous families. Like I can't, that's what we do in my family. Like there's a lot of singing and my sisters and I just, we can't help ourselves. Like, and book 6, there is a lot of, there's a feeling of like a little bit more modern, like a lot of young love in that book. Oh my God, I love that book. I love, love, love that book. And Coda is the main character in that book. And he's one of my favorites too. Coda and Coyote. I don't know. I can't wait to tell more of that story because I'm not finished writing that one. And book 7 is where it all comes together, the weavers, the elders, the story keepers, what actually this whole series is leading up to, which is actually even beyond what the people in the West or sorry, in the East are experiencing. It's actually what they're preparing for as well. So we get to that
Oh,
huge question, like working toward there to the book 7. But it's fun. Don't get too like daunted. I'm like, maybe
amazing.
like people are gonna be like, oh my God, it's gonna be like a study this. No, I want people to have fun, Lori.
Yeah,
I
but
want
it's
them to just
also an experience. Tell them about the
yeah.
audio and where they're gonna be able to listen and how
Okay.
they should listen.
Okay, yeah.
Tell them they
Okay.
should.
Should. You should do this. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm gonna say though is that this is a playground. This is fun. This is like if you want to read these books, this is again my intention. If you want to read them and get some deeper meanings, there's tons of stuff planted in there. A lot of seeds, a lot of like stuff you go, oh, I recognize this, or oh my gosh, this is this concept, or I read this, like whatever. There's tons and tons and tons of stuff like that, like literally in every sentence. I think, intentionally placed there. But, and it could be like a really fun treasure hunt. And, okay, no, I said I wasn't gonna say but. Okay, so and it's also just a fun read. If people want to read it and they just want to like have a good read, that there's also that. There's no expectation for any sort of epiphanies to happen, any healing things, or just go in and have fun. I want people to really enjoy it because the stories are juicy. It's not like a whole highfalutin, like, you know, um, philosophical kind of, it's very poetic. I write, that's my style. But the stories are just fun ride. So anyway, yes, audiobook. So written word. I think I love reading on the page because you kind of sometimes have to see how it's put. I want to snuggle up and read it. I want to see the cover. I kiss my books sometimes. I'll be like, thank you. If I have like a really good book and I finished it, I'm like, I'll give it like a kiss before I put it on the shelf. I know I'm weird. I'm weird. Whatever. But yeah. And then so to see how the writer, like where the paragraphs were, or if there was something italicized, and I capitalized certain words that you don't normally capitalize. So things like that. That's really nice, for
I do that.
the written piece. Yeah. And then you can go back, you can go back to the rewinding or whatever. You can just like you can mark it up. My daughter hates it when people dog ear their books, like, fold the corners. I don't do that, but I have been known to write in books, okay? Or
Oh,
put
I
like
double dog ear. I do the one and then I do the two and I do the bottom.
oh, I can tell you would. I can tell you're just a free spirit. Like I can tell. And you wanna, you have your system.
Oh, my
Um
books are a mess.
I always have a pen in my hair. I should have one right now because I'm like taking out the pen. I gotta write down in the book that I'm reading. And then okay, so then there's that, and the audio experience is really important because, like for me, because as a storyteller, I realized I through these years I kind of realized I kind of am a storyteller. Like you've actually said to me before, it was so fun because you're one of those people that helped me to realize that because you said, man, I love getting voice messages from you because it's like my own personal podcast.
It's true. Oh my goodness. And you have a really beautiful voice quality. Yeah, I like the sound of your voice, and you're the one doing the voiceover, so
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
perfect.
And I had tons of practice. I mean, my kids and I read to my kids, like, well, I do literary readings, but that's nothing compared to like reading to your children every night. And I would do the voices. I'm not doing voices, by the way. The audio is just being read because I cannot do like 75 different people and keep that in my head. It might be like a little lower when it's a guy and a little higher, but like, there might be a little like change when they're having a conversation, but I'm not doing accents or this is not an acted, it's not like a performance, but it is a
Right.
performance in the way that it's a storyteller, like telling the story. And we're creating music, and that's not going to have a score through the whole thing. That would just be overwhelming, overstimulating, too much stuff going on. But there will be like intro music. There will be a few, probably four or so actual full experiences interspersed throughout each book. So let's say there's a really significant Sundance scene, which there is. And I love the Sundance scene and all the men and they're dancing for like 3 days. And it's just glorious. I love this. I love these scenes. I actually have a few of them. Like it's the same Sundance, but it kind of goes throughout the books with each different perspective. And so that one will likely have, like music that we will produce. I have someone I'm working with to do the music portion. And I wasn't gonna do any vocals. And there was a song actually that's already out. And it actually accompanies the prologue and the trailer. And that's my voice on there. And I thought, well, I'd love to do it because I love singing. But man, it's like I'm so inconsistent. And if I was to sing, live, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. Because depending how I feel, how I'm breathing, if I'm stressed, if I like, my all these kinds of different factors. And I thought, I don't know if I could pull that off. So we tried it and I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. We didn't have to like, auto tune it and shit like that. I mean, it was just like, okay, we're just gonna try to just like clean it, make sure the mic sounds good and all that kind of stuff. So I love it. And so if there's gonna be some vocals, maybe like a little riff that I sing, instead of like just quoting it as it is quoted in the book, I might actually sing it. So, Superstition, for instance, there's a few lines of Superstition by Stevie Wonder that introduces one of the chapters, for instance, and I might just sing it, instead of. So there's lots of different little bits of goodies in there that take you on an audio journey as well. And we're actually going to release the full length songs as a album, like, it's going to be, available for people to
Very
just
cool.
like download the songs, just the songs. And we're going to do binaural beats. We've got,
Mhm.
different like mechanisms of how to, entrain your brain, like, which means like, we become coherent with each other, the reader and the listener.
Very cool.
And that gets you into this heart space of receivership. So it's cool. Like because I've studied a lot of that stuff, sound and resonance and pitch and, breath and all those sorts of things. We'll probably likely have a breath work kind of scene. And
Oh,
so it's told in
wonderful.
a story, right? Lori, yeah, I know you and breath work, girl. That's how we met. Okay,
Yes.
people watching. That's
Yeah.
how we met. Yeah.
I was the sales rep for a globally known breathwork group, and I'm so happy that I ended up there and ended up meeting you and many other wonderful people from around the world. And I've stayed connected with the clients that I sold this product to
Do I
to
ever
help me
love that?
launch, into, what I pursue today in terms of offering something that is of deep value to my community. And now I know how to reach people around the world with it and stay connected with people, whether or not you're trying to sell each other something, you
Yeah.
know.
I love it. I love it. And I'm so grateful that I met you through doing that. Like, I can't believe it. And it was actually an accident. I mean, this is the thing. I'm writing about this there's so many serendipitous moments that are actually kind of like, yeah, it was meant to be. Like, I mean, we were magnetized to each other for some reason. I was actually double booked. And we didn't realize that they had double booked us. So I was actually supposed to meet with a different rep, not you. And so
Oh,
you were the first one of that day. And I was like, oh, sorry, I didn't actually miss it. I did meet with Lori. And we talked, what, I don't know, like hour and a half because you didn't have any appointments after that. And then, I mean, we just like click. I know that you are meant to be in my life. And so again, I tell those kinds of stories all through the books, how these supposedly happenstance events happen, and it leads to this and to this and to this, and it's just weaving all that together, and eventually you'll see, the tapestry that it creates, from that weaving. So
It
yeah.
sure does.
Hmm.
It's been a wild, wonderful ride weaving the
Yeah.
tapestry. My poetic friend.
Yay.
Do you want to quickly touch on the summit that people are currently immersed in when they
Yeah.
watch when this is
Well,
aired?
I hope you watch all the rest of the episodes, or I'm calling them sessions. I was trying to find a really good word for that. It's not really an episode. It's not
So
like
I
a
call mine
interview.
presentations in my whole full
Okay.
spectrum course for teens. Each one is a
Yeah.
presentation because each one is a present, and I
Oh,
am
nice.
presenting, and you don't want to lessen anyone, right? That's my
How
deal
about
there.
session? We have a a jam session. But I mean, it's not just jamming because it's full of like intentional things. So yeah, I mean, okay. So yeah, there are many more sessions, presentations, that kind of thing, throughout this summit. So check them out. That's all I want to say, because they're gonna have a lot of intro
Okay,
on the page, and
wonderful.
throughout the whole experience of being part of this showcase event. Yeah, so
Watch
thanks
them
for
all.
the
I know I
opportunity.
will. I watched a good deal of her last summit, which is so long ago now, with like 8 or 10 years,
I
or
know.
my goodness.
Well, I mean, the last one I did was probably 4 years ago. That was like that conversation series with friends on Healthy Family Formula. It's on YouTube
Okay,
still. I love that one. That one was actually, that's my favorite. But yeah, it's been a while. So I'm getting my feet wet again in the summit space, and it's been
wonderful.
it's been great. I'm so glad that it was you who was interviewing me for the first one. Like, this is the first interview for this series. Okay, so yeah.
Set the bar pretty high, do you believe?
Right, we did. You did.
All right, cool.
All right. Okay, so if you don't, do you have any more questions for me, Lori? I'm gonna wrap up if we're good. If you're
Oh,
convenient.
oh yeah, let's just do another hour. You ready?
Okay.
Okay,
No,
let's go.
people will be like, I'm turning this crap off. Okay, so no. All right. So I just want to say thanks, Lori, for being here and being part of this summit and interviewing me. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate all of you who were listening. And I'm just gonna end with my new calling card. Thank you for playing.